Picture this, a rusty, beaten down 1992 Kenworth W900 sitting in a field somewhere in rural Texas, engine cold and dead, chrome stripped away by years of neglect, paint peeling off like old skin blistered by 100 summers, cab full of dirt and bird nests and memories nobody wanted anymore. The windshield is cracked, the tires are flat and crumbling, the exhaust stacks are bent, the bumper is hanging by one bracket, weeds have grown up around the axles like the earth itself is trying to swallow this machine whole. Most people would walk right past it. Most people would shake their heads and keep moving. Most people would say it is done, say it is beyond saving, say it is not worth the time or the money or the effort. But not us. Because when you look at a truck like that, a real truck, a Kenworth W900, you do not see junk sitting in a field. You see history. We see iron and steel and engineering that was built to last. You see a machine that hauled freight across highways most people never even drove on, that survived blizzards in Wyoming and summer heat in the Mojave Desert, that climbed mountain passes in Colorado and crossed the flatlands of Kansas in the dark of night with a full load behind it. You see a truck that was part of the backbone of American commerce for decades, and you just know that a machine like that deserves better than rusting away forgotten in a field. So we bought her. And today every single detail of what it took to bring this legendary truck back to life is what this video is all about. This is the full, complete top to bottom, front to back restoration of a 1992 Kenworth W900, one of the most iconic big rigs ever built in the United States of America. And we are not cutting a single corner, not skipping a single step, not leaving a single piece of this truck unaddressed. By the time we are done, this machine is going to look better than it did the day it rolled off the assembly line in Chillicothe, Ohio, and it is going to run better than most brand new trucks on the road today. Let us get into it. The first thing you do when you bring a truck like this home is you spend time with it. You do not just start ripping parts off. You walk around it slowly and you look at everything. You open every door and look inside. You climb underneath and look at the frame. You pop the hood and look at the engine. We look at the tires, the wheels, the suspension, the brake chambers, the airlines, the wiring, the fuel tanks, the exhaust, the gav mounts, the fifth wheel, the lights, the mirrors, the chrome, the glass. You make notes. You take photographs. You build a complete picture in your mind of exactly what you're dealing with before you touch a single wrench. Because restoration is not just about fixing what is broken. It is about understanding the whole machine. Understanding how every system works, how every system connects to every other system, where the weak points are, where the hidden damage is, where years of use and neglect have left their mark in ways that are not obvious at first glance. So that is exactly what we did. We spent 2 full days just inspecting this truck from one end to the other and making our list. And then when we were done, we had a very clear picture of everything that needed to happen to make this Kenworth W900 everything it deserved to be. The frame was our first major area of focus, and honestly, it was one of the most encouraging parts of the whole inspection. The 1992 Kenworth W900 rides on a heavy-duty steel ladder frame that was built to handle the most demanding applications in the trucking industry, and this one had held up remarkably well considering its age and the conditions it had been sitting in. There was surface rust on the rails, significant in some spots, but when we hit it with a hammer and probed it with a screwdriver, the steel underneath was solid and full thickness everywhere we checked. There were no cracks, no bends, no twisted sections, no evidence of any serious impact damage. The cross members were all intact. The body mounts were corroded but solid. The fifth wheel mounting brackets were tight. This frame had decades of life left in it, and that was huge, because the frame is the foundation of everything else on the truck. Everything bolts to the frame. Everything depends on the frame being straight and strong. And this one was. We took the truck to a frame shop and had it checked on the alignment rack just to be absolutely certain, and it came back perfectly straight within factory tolerances. that told us a lot about the life this truck had lived. It had been worked hard, but it had been driven by people who knew how to handle it, who kept it on the road and did not put it in any ditches or over any curbs that would have tweaked the frame. Good, we could work with this. We sandblasted the entire frame from end to end. Every rail, every cross member, every bracket, every tab. Bare metal, all of it. Not a speck of rust or old paint remaining anywhere. Then we hit it with 2 coats of self-etching primer to seal the metal and give us a perfect base, followed by 2 coats of a high-built epoxy primer, and then 2 coats of a gloss black chassis paint that is rated for UV resistance, chemical resistance, and impact resistance. The finished frame is absolutely beautiful. Jet black, perfectly smooth and protected against rust for decades to come. Every mounting bracket was inspected individually. 2 cross members showed enough corrosion on their ends where they meet the frame rails that we decided to replace them outright rather than try to patch them. New cross members were fapped up from heavy-duty steel, fitted, welded in, and finished with the same paint process as the rest of the frame. Every bolt hole was chased with a tap to clean up the threads. Every mounting surface was cleaned perfectly flat. This frame is ready to carry this truck and everything it will ever be asked to carry for many more decades. Now let us talk about the heart of this machine, the engine. The 1992 Kenworth W900 we are working with is powered by a Cummins NTC 400 Big Cam IV. And if you know anything about diesel engines, you know that this power plant is one of the most respected, most beloved, most proven engines in the history of American trucking. The Cummins Big Cam series was the engine of choice for owner-operators and major fleets alike throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s. And for good reason. These engines are incredibly strong, incredibly reliable, and when they are properly maintained, they will run for well over 1 million miles before needing major work. This one had somewhere around 800,000 miles on it when we got it, which sounds like a lot. But for a big cam that has been maintained correctly, that is not even close to the end of its life. We pulled the engine and sent it to a specialist diesel machine shop that works exclusively on big bore truck engines, and the inspection results were very encouraging. The block itself was in excellent condition, no cracks, no hot spots, no evidence of any catastrophic overheating events. The cylinder bores were worn, as you would expect at that mileage, but they were worn evenly, which tells you the engine had been run properly and had gotten good lubrication throughout its life. The main bearing journals and rod journals on the crankshaft were within spec, so the crank got magnafluxed for cracks, polished and reused. The camshaft was inspected and replaced as a matter of course on a rebuild of this mileage. The cylinder head was completely disassembled. The head itself was checked for cracks and warpage. The valve seats were ground, new valves were installed, new valve guides were fitted, and the head was completely rebuilt to factory spec. New pistons and rings were installed, new connecting rod bearings and main bearings. The block was bored and honed to match the new pistons. The fuel injection system, one of the defining characteristics of the Big Cam, was completely gone through. Every injector was rebuilt to factory flow specifications. The injection pump was rebuilt, the fuel lines were replaced, the fuel filters were replaced. The J-brake, the engine compression brake that Kenworth W900 drivers rely on to control their speed on long mountain descents, was fully serviced and adjusted. The cooling system got new water pump, new thermostat, new hoses, new clamps, and the radiator was removed, boiled out, pressure tested, and reinstalled. The turbocharger, a whole-set unit that forces compressed air into the cylinders to maximize power and efficiency, was replaced with a professionally rebuilt unit that will deliver consistent boost pressure for hundreds of thousands of miles. The air cleaner assembly was cleaned, inspected, and fitted with new filter elements. The exhaust manifold was cleaned and inspected. One crack section was repaired by a certified welder using the correct procedure for cast iron, and the whole manifold was coated with a high-temperature ceramic coating that will protect it from corrosion and reduce heat radiation into the engine compartment. By the time this engine was buttoned back up and installed back into the truck, it was essentially a brand new engine in all the ways that matter. The power is there, the efficiency is there, the reliability is there. This Cummins Big Cam is going to run for another 1,000,000 miles. The transmission on this truck is a Fuller Roadranger RTLO 1891 a 13-speed overdrive unit. That is, without question, one of the finest truck transmissions ever made. Fuller Roadranger gearboxes have been the standard of the industry for generations, and the reason is simple: they are built to an incredibly high standard of quality. They are incredibly strong, and they are incredibly smooth to operate when they are properly maintained and properly adjusted. This one had been shifted through its gears many hundreds of thousands of times, and while the internal components were still fundamentally sound, there was wear on the synchronizers. The shift forks showed some scoring, and the seals were all leaking. We completely disassembled the transmission, cleaned every component, measured every clearance, and replaced everything that showed wear beyond factory specification. New synchronizer rings throughout, new shift forks, new bearings, new seals everywhere, new gaskets. The case was cleaned and inspected for cracks. It was solid. Everything went back together to factory spec with fresh gear oil, and the shift quality when we first tested it was absolutely perfect, smooth, precise, effortless. The clutch got a complete replacement as well. We went with a heavy-duty ceramic disc clutch, rated for the torque output of the rebuilt engine, along with a new pressure plate and a new flywheel that was resurfaced to a perfect friction surface. The clutch linkage was cleaned, lubricated, and adjusted for the correct pedal feel and engagement point. The front and rear drive shafts were inspected, the U-joints were replaced on both, and everything was balanced and reinstalled. The rear axles on the 1992 Kenworth W900 are a tandem set of Eaton single reduction drives, and these are another area where Kenworth absolutely did not mess around when it came to building a truck that could handle serious work. These axles are designed to handle the full legal gross vehicle weight on the worst roads in America, and they do it day after day and year after year. We pulled both axles, stripped them completely, inspected every gear and bearing inside the differentials, replaced all the bearings, resealed both differentials, and replaced the axle seals at the wheel ends. The brake drums were removed from all four rear wheels, measured, and replaced. They were within the discard limit, but close enough that replacing them made much more sense than trying to get another year out of them. New brake shoes were installed on all four rear axles, new slack adjusters were installed and properly adjusted, and new brake chambers were installed on all axles front and rear. The air lines throughout the brake system were replaced with new, dot-rated nylon lines. The glad hands were replaced. The air dryer, the component that removes moisture from the compressed air in the brake system to prevent corrosion and freezing in cold weather, was replaced with a new unit. The air compressor was rebuilt. The spring brake valves were replaced. When we put the truck on the brake roller tester at the end of the project, the braking force was even side to side and well within spec on every axle. This truck stops exactly where it should. The front steering axle is a Kenworth unit that was built to handle both the weight of the massive hood and engine up front, and the steering forces that come with guiding an 80,000-pound loaded truck down the highway. We completely rebuilt this axle. New kingpins and kingpins bushings, new thrust bearings, new tie rod ends, new drag link ends, new wheel bearings and seals, and a complete front brake rebuild with new drums, new shoes, and new hardware. The wheel alignment was set on a specialized truck alignment rack to the exact factory specifications for toe camber and caster, and the steering was adjusted for the correct amount of play. When you climb behind the wheel of this truck and steer it down the road, it tracks perfectly straight and responds precisely to every input, exactly the way a truck of this caliber should behave. The suspension system got a thorough going over as well. The front spring hangers were inspected and found to be solid. The front leaf springs were in good condition, no broken leaves, no cracks, no severe fatigue, so they were cleaned, repacked with lubricant at the spring pads, and reinstalled with new U-bolts and new front shock absorbers. The rear suspension, a walking beam tandem setup, was fully serviced. The torque rods were replaced. The rubber bushings throughout the rear suspension were all replaced with new units, new U-bolts on the rears. The result is a suspension that absorbs road imperfections smoothly and keeps the truck level and stable under all loading conditions. Now let us talk about the cab, because this is where the restoration story gets really detailed and really interesting. The cab on a 1992 Kenworth W900 is an all-steel construction, none of the composite or aluminum materials that came to dominate cab design in later decades. This is a steel cab through and through, and that means it is heavy and it is strong and it develops rust in specific ways that you have to know how to deal with. The floor of the cab, the area directly behind and around the pedals, had rusted through in 2 spots. This is extremely common on trucks of this era because water gets in around the pedals and the firewall and sits there on the floor, and over years and decades it eventually eats through. We cut out both rusted sections completely, back to solid metal on all sides, and welded in new steel floor patches that were then seam sealed and undercoated to make sure this will never be a problem again. The cab corners, another common rust point, show some surface rust but no penetration, and those areas were treated with a rust converter, primed and sealed. The sleeper section of the cab had moisture damage to the interior walls. The original paneling had absorbed water over the years. The truck sat outside and had delaminated and grown mold. All of that came out. We treated the bare metal walls with rust converter and epoxy primer, installed new rigid foam insulation for both thermal and acoustic performance, and then installed new interior wall panels. The headliner was replaced with a new unit. The floor of the sleeper got new plywood substrate and new vinyl flooring. The sleeper bunks got new foam mattresses and new upholstery. The result is a sleeper that is clean, comfortable, quiet, and completely free of the smell of mildew and old truck that is unfortunately so common in trucks of this age. The wiring harness on any truck from this era is always a concern, and this one was no exception. 30 years of vibration, heat cycles, rodents chewing on insulation, and previous owners splicing in repairs with tape and wire nuts had left the factory wiring harness in a state that could charitably be described as unreliable and less charitably described as a fire hazard. We made the decision early on to replace the entire harness with a new OEM specification replacement unit. This is not a cheap or easy job on a truck like this. The main cab harness alone has dozens of connectors and runs through every part of the cab, but it is absolutely the right thing to do if you want a truck that you can trust completely. Every connector was replaced with new weatherproof units. Every fuse block was replaced. Every relay was replaced. The headlight wiring was upgraded to handle the LED headlights we were planning. The marker light wiring was replaced. The interior lighting wiring was replaced. The gauge cluster wiring was replaced. By the time we were done with the electrical system, every circuit on this truck was clean, correctly rated, properly terminated, and properly protected. The electrical system is one of those areas where you absolutely cannot cut corners on a restoration. Bad wiring causes fires, and fires destroy trucks and endanger lives. The instrument cluster on the 1992 Kenworth W900 is a work of art in its own right. A full array of gauges that gives the driver a complete picture of every system in the truck at a glance. Air pressure gauges, oil pressure, coolant temperature, exhaust temperature, fuel level, voltmeter, tachometer, and speedometer, all of them arranged in a clear, logical layout that lets an experienced driver monitor everything with just a quick scan. Every gauge in this cluster was removed, disassembled, cleaned, and tested. 4 of them had damaged internals and were replaced with matching NUS units that we sourced from a specialty supplier. The gauge faces were all in good condition once they were cleaned. The original printing was still clear and legible. Everything was reassembled and reinstalled, and when we powered the truck up for the first time, every needle swept to the correct position and every light illuminated. Beautiful. The dashboard itself had taken a beating over the decades. The original padded dash covering had hardened, cracked and shrunk in the heat, which is an absolutely inevitable consequence of 30 years of Texas summers. We stripped the dash completely. Every switch, every knob, every piece of trim came off, and had it professionally recovered in a two-tone black and charcoal vinyl that looks period correct and will last for decades. All the switch labels were replaced with new engraved plates. The cab controls for the air suspension, the differential locks, the trailer brake and the fifth wheel were all serviced and cleaned. The HVAC system, heating, ventilation and air conditioning got a complete rebuild. New blower motor, new heater core, new evaporator core, new evaporator core, new expansion valve, new receiver dryer. The system was vacuumed and recharged with our 145 refrigerant, and when we tested it, it blew ice cold on the hottest setting. Something this truck had probably not been able to do in many years. The seats in this truck are one of the first things a driver notices when they climb in, and they're one of the biggest factors in driver comfort over a long run. The original driver's seat, a Bostrom air ride unit, had foam that had completely broken down and upholstery that was cracked, torn, and had lost every bit of its original padding. We rebuilt the seat from the frame up. New airbag, new foam cushions cut to the original profile, new upholstery in black vinyl with red accent stitching and an embroidered Kenworth logo on the headrest. The result is a seat that looks show quality and feels genuinely comfortable, something a driver could sit in for 10 hours and not be exhausted by. The passenger seat got the same treatment. The sleeper jump seat was reupholstered to match. The steering wheel, original Kenworth with the silver horn button, was wrapped in leather by a professional trimmer and feels absolutely perfect in your hands. Now the part everybody has been waiting for, the exterior. The paint and bodywork on this truck is where the transformation becomes truly dramatic, where the before and after gap becomes almost impossible to believe. When we got this truck, the paint was a faded, oxidized, peeling mess of what had once been a medium blue, barely visible under the grime and rust staining and overspray from various previous repairs. The bodywork underneath was rough, dents in the fenders, creases in the hood, a repaired section on the passenger door that had been done badly decades ago and had started to show its age. Getting this truck to show quality in the paint and body department was going to take serious work, and we knew it from the start. Every panel on this truck went through full metal finishing before a single drop of primer was sprayed. The hood, that iconic long-nose hood that makes the Kenworth W900 one of the most recognizable silhouettes in American trucking, was completely stripped of its old paint, all the way down to bare metal, and every dent and ding was massaged out using a combination of traditional body hammer and dolly work and paintless dent repair techniques. The fenders got the same treatment. The doors were stripped and straightened. The sleeper panels were straightened. The cab corners were repaired where they had begun to show their age. The bumper was straightened and smoothed. The fuel tank surrounds were repaired. Every panel, every surface, every curve and edge was worked until it was as straight and smooth and perfect as it would have been the day this truck was assembled. Then came the primer, a two-stage system starting with self-etching primer on the bare metal, followed by a high-build urethane primer surfacer that was sprayed in thick coats and then block sanded, multiple rounds of blocking, first with coarse paper to knock down the high spots, then progressively finer paper to smooth everything out, until every surface was absolutely perfect. This blocking process alone took the better part of a week, and it is honestly one of the most important steps in the whole paint job. If the surface is not perfect before you spray color, the color will not be perfect. There are no shortcuts here. The color we chose for this truck is a deep, rich burgundy red with a gold pearl added to the mid-coat, a color that shifts and glows in different lighting conditions, that looks almost brown in shade and absolutely on fire in direct sunlight. It is a color worthy of the 900's reputation. We sprayed 3 coats of base color, then 2 coats of the pearl mid-coat to build up that depth, then 4 coats of high-gloss urethane clear coat that was wet sanded between every coat, and then final wet sanded with 2000 grit and machine polish to a mirror finish. The depth of this paint job in person is genuinely breathtaking. It looks like you could reach your hand into it. It is the kind of paint that makes people stop in parking lots and just stand there looking at it. The chrome on a Kenworth 1900 is a huge part of what makes this truck so stunning to look at, and we went all in on getting this truck's chrome perfect. The original grille was badly pitted and had several broken pieces. We sourced a replacement grille shell in good condition and had it professionally triple chrome plated to a show quality finish. The bumper was straightened, had filler work done to get it perfectly smooth, and was chrome plated as well. The visor above the windshield was stripped, straightened, and re-chromed. The exhaust stacks, those tall, straight vertical pipes that are as iconic as anything else about the W900, were replaced with new stainless steel units that were then polished to a mirror finish. The mirror arms, the grab handles, the step bars, the hood latches, the cab corner trim, the marker light bezels, the headlight bezels, all of it was either re-chromed, replaced with new chrome parts, or polished to show quality. The air cleaner stacks on each side of the hood were removed, sanded smooth and polished to a brilliant shine. The battery box covers were polished. The fuel tank surrounds were polished. We replaced the original turrets with modern LED units that put out dramatically more light than the old sealed beams while maintaining the classic round headlight look that is essential to the W900's character. LED marker lights and clearance lights were installed throughout, more reliable, brighter, and more energy efficient than the original incandescent units. The wheels and tires on a show quality restoration of a truck like this are critically important, because the wrong wheels and tires can completely undermine even the best paint and chrome work. We went with polished aluminum disc wheels on all positions, front and rear, that were polished to a mirror finish that complements the chrome and the paint perfectly. New rubber was mounted on every wheel. A quality steer tire on the front rated for the load capacity of this axle, and quality drive tires on the rears in a balanced configuration. The tires were balanced and the wheels were mounted with new lug nuts and hub covers. When this truck rolls, every wheel catches the light and throws it back at you, and the effect is exactly what you want. One of the details that separates a truly great restoration from a merely good one is the attention paid to the small things, the things that most people might not even notice consciously, but that their brain registers as right or wrong when they look at the truck. Things like the door seals being perfect, so the doors close with that solid tongue that tells you everything is aligned and sealed correctly. Things like the exterior mirrors being perfectly aligned and having no slop in their adjustment mechanisms. Things like the air lines and electrical cables between the tractor and trailer connections being neatly routed and secured. Things like the toolboxes behind the cab being perfectly aligned and latched properly. Things like the mud flaps hanging perfectly straight and being mounted with new stainless steel hardware. We went through every one of these details on this truck, every single one. Because when you are doing a restoration at this level, there is no such thing as good enough. Either something is right or it is not, and if it is not, you fix it until it is. The day we rolled this truck out of the shop for its first photo shoot in the Texas sunshine was one of those days that you remember for the rest of your life if you are a truck person. We had been living with this project for months, seeing it every day in pieces, in primer, partially assembled, never quite being able to picture the finished product, even when you know intellectually what it is going to look like. And then suddenly there it is, all together, in the light, and it is better than you imagined. The burgundy paint glowing in the afternoon sun, the chrome blazing white in every direction, the stacks pointing straight up at the Texas sky, the polished wheels throwing light, the black frame gleaming underneath, the truck sitting perfectly level, perfectly aligned, looking like something that came from another dimension where trucks are built to be absolutely perfect. We stood there for a long moment just looking at it. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say. We fired the engine for the first time with everything assembled, and that Cummins big cam came to life with a sound that is absolutely unique. A deep, authoritative low-p diesel rumble that you feel in your sternum that sounds like nothing else on earth. that tells you immediately that this is a serious machine with serious power. The gauges all read correctly, the air pressure built quickly, the temperature came up smoothly and stabilized right where it should. We let it warm up fully and then took it out on the road for the first time, and from the very first mile it was clear that everything had come together perfectly. The engine pulls strongly and smoothly through the entire power band. The transmission shifts cleanly and precisely to all 13 gears. The steering is accurate and requires almost no correction to track straight. The brakes are firm and balanced. The air-wide suspension absorbs road imperfections smoothly. The cab is quiet, dramatically quieter than it would have been new, thanks to the additional insulation we added during the restoration. The air conditioning blows cold. The heater works, every light works, every gauge reads correctly. This truck is everything it was supposed to be and then some. The 1992 Kenworth W900 occupies a very specific and very important place in the history of American trucking. It came from an era when trucks were still built with a certain philosophy. The philosophy that a truck should be as tough as the work it was asked to do, that it should be built to last rather than built to a price point, that it should give the driver the tools they needed to do their job efficiently and safely without cutting corners on quality or capability. The long-nose conventional design of the W900 is not just aesthetic, it is functional, allowing the engine to breathe better and cooling to be more efficient and the driver to have more visibility around the engine compartment in tight situations. Dow steel construction is not just heavy, it is strong, absorbing the tremendous forces that come with hauling maximum loads over rough roads without flexing or cracking or fatigue failing the way that lighter materials eventually do. The mechanical systems, the engine, the transmission, the axles, the suspension are all overbuilt relative to their rated capacity, which means they last longer and handle abuse better than systems that are designed to the exact minimum specification. This is what it meant to build a serious truck in 1992, and the fact that examples like this one are still worthy of complete restoration 3 decades later is the proof of that philosophy's correctness. There is also a cultural dimension to the Kenworth W900 that cannot be ignored when you talk about why machines like this one matter and why restoring them matters. The big rig, the 18-wheeler, the long-haul truck, these are as deeply American as anything in our national identity. The truckers who drove machines like this one were the people who kept the country supplied, who moved the goods that built our economy, who drove through the night and through the weather and through the hard miles so that store shelves were stocked and factories were supplied and America kept moving. The truck stop, the CB radio, the sound of a big diesel engine on a dark highway, these are part of the soundtrack of American life in the second half of the 20th century, and the Kenworth W900 was one of the machines at the center of all of it. Restoring one of these trucks is not just a mechanical project, it is an act of cultural preservation. It is saying that these machines and the era they represent, and the people who built them and drove them and maintained them, deserve to be remembered and honored. Every hour we spend making this truck perfect is an hour spent keeping that history alive. We are often asked whether restoration projects like this one make financial sense, whether the money spent on the restoration can be recouped in the value of the finished truck. The honest answer is that it depends entirely on how you define value. In purely financial terms, a full rotisserie restoration of a classic truck at this level of quality rarely pencils out. The cost of the labor and parts typically exceeds the market value of even the most desirable examples in the best condition. But that is not the right way to think about it. The value in a project like this is not in the potential resale price. The value is in the experience of doing the work, in the deep satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole, of developing skills and knowledge that cannot be learned any other way, of being part of a community of people who share a passion for these machines and the history they represent. The value is in the finished truck itself, in being the person who saved this particular Kenworth W900, who gave it another 50 years of life, who made sure it will be around for future generations to see and appreciate. That kind of value does not show up on a balance sheet, but it is absolutely real. For those of you who are thinking about taking on a restoration project of your own, whether it is a truck like this one, or a classic car, or a vintage tractor, or any other old machine that has caught your eye and your imagination, we want to leave you with a few thoughts from everything we learned on this project. First, take your time with the inspection before you start the work. Understand completely what you are dealing with before you spend a single dollar on parts. Second, do not underestimate the importance of the structural elements, the frame, the cab structure, the suspension mounts. These are the foundation of everything else, and if they are not right, nothing else will be right either. Third, be methodical and document everything. Photograph every step. Keep notes on every part number, every measurement, every adjustment. You will thank yourself later when you need to remember exactly what you did. Fourth, do not cut corners on the things that matter for safety. Brakes, tires, steering, lighting. A truck that looks beautiful but stops badly or handles unpredictably is not a finished restoration, it is a danger. Fifth, and most importantly, enjoy the process. The finished truck is wonderful, but the journey to get there, the problem solving and the skill building and the satisfaction of each step completed correctly is where the real reward lives. Take your time, do it right, and enjoy every hour of it. This 1992 Kenworth W900 is finished. She is everything she was meant to be and more. The Cummins big cam under that long hood is ready to run for another 1,000,000 miles. The fuller Roadranger is ready to be shifted through its 13 gears by skilled hands on winding mountain highways. The burgundy paint is ready to turn heads at every truck show and every truck stop from here to the Pacific coast. The chrome is ready to blaze in the morning sun on an empty road with nothing but miles ahead. This is what it looks like when you do it right. This is what it looks like when you respect the machine, respect the history, respect the craft of restoration, and refuse to accept anything less than the absolute best result you are capable of. This Kenworth W900 earned her glory days back, and she's going to shine for a very long time.